Despite the somewhat precarious position that the dwarven civilizations in my new world have found themselves in after 500 years of world generation, and the relatively immense strength of the goblin and human civilizations to the west, seeing the two continents next to one another, so full of potential enemies and separated by only a thin channel of water, was enough for me to throw caution to the wind and set out on an expedition to build a fortress that would connect the continents. The moment we arrived, on the western shore for some reason known only to my expedition leader, our mission was technically already accomplished. Militias from the homeland would now be able to loot, raid, and pillage across the channel to their heart's content. But I had loftier goals for this expedition. Specifically, I wanted to build a highly militarized citadel split across the two coasts, and I wanted to dig a tunnel between the continents to make it possible for adventurers to cross the strait year-round. And the best way to get started on both goals was to begin digging a tunnel under the ocean. So that's what I told my dwarves to do. Eventually, after 8 months, multiple diversions around light aquifers, and a hyper-focus related food scare that forced us to backtrack and build an emergency farm, east and west were joined together, and the migrants that had been milling around aimlessly on the eastern beach could finally be put to work. For the next few years, our fortress grew and mostly flourished inside some pillars in the first cavern, but we did have some problems that threatened our position as the bridge between worlds. First came the giant agitated buzzards, picking apart my fresh recruits and clogging up our cage traps whenever given the opportunity. Then came the werebulls, who tore through my militias, which were already weakened due to my insistence that they be split up to defend both coasts at the same time instead of one central location, and infected dwarves here and there as they went. And then finally, there were the goblins, who took advantage of the aftermath of a particularly vicious winter where 5 of my dwarves transformed into werebulls and eviscerated the fortress. But while I watched my fortress crumble before my eyes, I wasn't feeling too bad. I may have failed to defend the crossing, but the tunnel had survived for 5 years without springing a leak, and so I figured that it must be good to go for future adventurers. So you can imagine my surprise when I made my way to the tunnel entrance as an adventurer and found that there was water blocking my way. I held my breath and tried to force my way through, but came up a couple 100 blocks short, disappointed and a little bit bewildered. Realizing then that I definitely should have spent some time on a backup bridge in case the tunnel failed, I quickly embarked on a second expedition a little south of the first. My dreams of a bi-coastal citadel had been thoroughly dashed by werebulls and goblins, so this time I was solely, and humbly might I add, looking to build a bridge for future adventurers. But the agitated animals that had been a minor nuisance on my first expedition became cold-blooded kestrels this time around. Even though most of my embark party had been turned into soldiers for this exact scenario, the bumbling giant flies and menacing giant wrens returned en masse whenever they were dispatched, subjecting my dwarves to death by 1,000 pecks. Having lost my first tunnel to either the might of the ocean or the subtlety of an aquifer, and having witnessed the futility of trying to build a bridge in a land of birds, I embarked on my third expedition with an albatross around my neck and the idea that I should dig a tunnel as low as I could go to avoid the aquifers and then smooth the walls anyways, because that would destroy the non-existent aquifer tiles I was so scared of. And so for 1.5 years, that's what I got my dwarves to do. Outside of building a small base camp, the whole world became about digging and smoothing a 400-tile-long tunnel between the continents, to the point that, despite only having 22 dwarves in the fortress, my dwarves managed to form a stoneworkers guild. And once it was finished, I was confident. This had to be. And then the game crashed when I tried to walk through my territory in adventure mode. So I reloaded my save and crossed the ice to approach the fortress on the other side, and had the same thing happen again. Finally, I reloaded, finished the little trek I had started on the one continent on the other in a little human town, and called it a day. It seems to me that forces outside of my control didn't want out-of-season crossings to take place, Perhaps Stibmer the Soaked, the great green tree frog deity, found my linking of coast to be blasphemous. Who knows? So I guess I'll call my intercontinental expeditions a partial success, followed by 100 deaths and a dozen hours of increasingly desperate floundering. What more could you ask for? Thanks for watching, an extra thank you to those of you who support me on Patreon, and I'll see you next time.